Ever imagine corporations marketing their brands in space? Join me as I explore this new frontier with Chantelle Baier, founder of ForSpace. Chantelle and I will discuss the pros and cons and how brands of all sizes, along with government agencies, can meaningfully contribute to human space exploration while addressing Earth's issues. Join us as we get rebelliously curious. Chantelle, thank you so much for joining me on Rebelliously Curious today. I'm always a fan to speak with anybody that's Canadian, because as most people know, I'm Canadian, and also a woman working in space. It's so unbelievable to talk to women that are pioneering and doing so much that women before were not able to do for many, many different reasons. So it's great to see that and now be able to talk to so many more women that are really advancing space and moving things forward. So you are the founder of ForSpace. Can you tell me a little bit about what is ForSpace? And it's the first women-owned space company.
Yes. So ForSpace, I set it up so that it would be a vehicle to pipe in non-traditional space companies. So everything from companies such as Procter & Gamble, Comcast, these types of entities to be able to interact with the space industry and kind of combine the technologies that space offers to their entity. And then also a way for them to utilize marketing dollars, research and development, and innovate faster within the space industry too. So it's kind of twofold. And you're right, ForSpace actually became the first woman-owned company on the moon, February 22nd of this year, 2024. And so we have a wonderful bridge of technology that we pair with different entities and how we can really push innovation forward.
So as a Canadian, I asked this, are there any challenges that you noticed throughout your career? And maybe being a woman as well, being a female Canadian entrepreneur in the space industry. Did you find any challenges both culturally and gender related?
There are a lot of challenges in this industry and just kind of pioneering this way, because a lot of people don't understand the opportunities yet. So it really takes a lot of time to kind of brief everybody and bring them up to speed. As a female founder, it is challenging, but you know what? We have support, and you have to look at your pockets of support in order to help push forward and just never kind of give up. And I think, I have a daughter, she just turned 11. And so I hope that by everything that I'm doing, it kind of opens up the world of opportunities for her and other girls, and then also just kids and families in general, to see that it doesn't matter if you're an engineer or if you're, a musician, you can actually participate in the space industry, no matter what your background is. And that door is just starting to open. And so ForSpace was really at the cusp of when NASA started lifting the red tape. And so we understand what the opportunities are in order to kind of activate and put things in space, and why would we want to kind of explore that industry. So I'll give you a good example. With NASA, they're not able to do branding, they're not able to do marketing, they're not able to do those things, but private companies can. So what SpaceX has done is they've allowed for more accessibility into the space industry. So we can actually go to the space station, we can go to the moon now. And what that allows us to do is bring private brands with us. So now we can start branding and marketing in places we hadn't been able to before. So when we are looking at projects, we want to make sure they're also tied to sustainable solutions and science projects as well. So we're not just putting a brand and a logo up on the moon, for instance, but we're actually going to pair that with scientific relevance so that these brands can really start making a difference with what they do. And a good example is with our artwork on the moon. What we did was we took humanity and culture, and we're starting to really connect that to the moon. And through our art exhibit, we're also connecting it to physical pieces that remain on Earth. And it really tells a story and pays tribute to 125 historical figures so that the world can start seeing why is it relevant to start doing poetry on the moon, music on the moon, things like that. And NASA really supports those efforts. They said, you know what? Art is just as important as science. And we need to start showing the world that, the development of the Sistine Chapel is just as important as discovering a moon around Jupiter, and so we're really excited about this opportunity and kind of bridging this gap. But because no one's done it before, of course, it comes with a lot of challenges and a lot of pushback, but we just keep moving forward.
The intersections between culture and space right now are meshing so well.
Yeah.
You said that agencies like NASA are not able to do any type of branding, right? But private companies can.
Yeah.
This might be a challenging question, but I would imagine that some people have some ethical questions about that. Why should we be branding and why should we be letting private companies, let's say, advertise or market within the space category? Culturally, I understand why. You're right. We need poetry and all of those things to be able to showcase our own human existence and culture within space. But outside of that, doesn't it get a little bit sticky with private companies and corporate companies and private branding and marketing and public relations? It can be a really fine line that can be walked.
So right now, I think one of the things is the policies that are in place when we're doing experiments and traveling to places such as the moon and Mars and beyond. And so, what exists right now as far as laws. And I know that when I think there was a mission to the moon that didn't quite make it, they had on board some ashes from human remains. And that brought up an ethical question of, who kind of safeguarded this. But right now, we follow kind of a lot of countries follow the Artemis Accords. And what that does is it positions some baseline rules for what we want to do. But as far as regulation, nothing really exists. So it's up to companies like ForeSpace and the lunar lander companies and all of the launch companies to sort of help with those types of activations of what we're going to start branding, what are the messages. And so, we have to NASA safety flight verify everything. So to get anything into space, it has to meet a lot of approvals. And so for communication networks and everything like that. But as far as branding, it's our responsibility to guide the brands and make sure that they're advertising kind of appropriately to what our overall vision is. So we're really careful to work with brands such as Procter & Gamble and say, okay, how can their brand help us to do science? And how can they start so that they're not just putting a logo, that we kind of pair that with different missions. And you'll see some wonderful projects on board the space station where they have wonderful examples of different brands and stuff too. For instance, they had there was a Lamborghini experiment where they developed a special molecule for paint for the Lamborghini. And then what that does, it drives marketing dollars into the research. And so it's a really exciting time where brands can do different things. And you've got astronauts that can pair some really great experiments. Like I think Crayola has an experiment that's going on board the space station. And those are exciting because it gets kids interested too. So we want to really push these brands, but we want to make sure that they are responsible in what we are achieving.
For sure. What brand guidelines are somewhat being developed right now? Because I know it's in the midst of, there are no brand guidelines in space, as you're saying, but some, I would imagine, along with best practices, are starting to be documented and created. What are some of them so far?
So far, there's really nothing that exists. So we have committees that are forming up and meeting. There's a lot of space legal groups that are coming together to kind of really pave the way. And as far as even developing an 18th SDG for the UN and to meet our sustainability goals.
Can you explain what that is just for our listeners and viewers?
Yeah, so the UN has their 17 SDGs in place right now, with a look at how we're bettering humanity, and we're propositioning, under my hat with the National Space Society, we're trying to position so that we recognize space is just as important to helping humanity as well, with a lot of the different technologies that we have, and so we're pushing that through kind of right now.
Yeah, because I would imagine that there's this cross connection between sustainability and space, right? We see that because you hear these echoes of people, especially in the Western culture, we hear this living in North America about how we're spending so much money on space, but we're not spending enough money on sustainability. So, how are brands working to combat that and be able to contribute to both meaningfully?
Sure. So that's not a mandate at this time, but some of the things that we've introduced are, we've got beautiful recycling systems on board the space station. How can we utilize those technologies here on Earth, right? And in space station, they haven't refueled their water system for like over 20 years. So we know that that can help us here on Earth. And then all the different technologies that we have in bringing through to the brands for sustainability efforts with recycling systems, and it's a really interesting way to see. We also have space technologies that can help us in areas of wildfire mitigation and disaster relief zones, tracking for disaster and stuff like that. And so we really want to push forward. And right now, we're really looking at the moon and Mars. NASA has an objective right now to really push moon and Mars. And so we want to get a lot of brands interested. And we don't want to, we want to make sure as we're placing these rules that we don't want to restrict the brands too much either. We want to get them excited about what the opportunities are. And so as they kind of create these laws, I think it's just kind of our responsibility to try and meet these different objectives. I think right now, because there's so much to still discover, pairing it with a science objective is important, using marketing dollars to really get the messaging out, and then also communicating to the public and giving back to us here on Earth is very important to kind of hit those three markets as we kind of venture into the universe. And because space accessibility is near. We've got our next mission to the moon coming up in 8 to 12 months. And so we want to make sure as we put our next missions on that they really make sense to the world, so that the world doesn't see it as we're just spending a lot of money on space. Why is that important to us?
Visually, while you're talking, I'm seeing all these things. Someone who's worked in marketing along with podcasting and writing for the debrief and working in the media space. I've worked in public relations for over 16 years. So for me, I'm just like my PR side of my brain is just going wild with creativity and ideas, and so excited to see that both sustainability and space they're not mutually exclusive. They can work together and build something really beautiful. And with the word beautiful, I say aesthetics. You talk about in previous interviews that I've read about aesthetics and why aesthetics are so important. Can you give me an idea of why you feel that aesthetics plays a part within space research or at NASA, and why it's something that you feel should be looked at and should be contributed to within research and exploration?
Sure. I would say that this goes back right to when I was a child. My mom didn't understand the same kind of messaging. Why are we spending a lot of money in the space industry and not spending it to help us here on Earth? But I think aesthetic is really important because things have to look amazing. We know the impact of marketing and how it really pulls together people to support those efforts. And so we need it to look beautiful, and we need these campaigns to be amazing. And, NASA's responsibility and their objective is just to make things work. They don't care about beauty and design. That's our responsibility. And so we feel it's really important because as we live on the moon, as we travel to Mars, we want it to be just as beautiful as we have it here on Earth. We're surrounded naturally here with beauty and design. We've got trees and we've got, so much architecture that doesn't exist on the moon. So we want to make sure we kind of start bringing it there. And I know from our first project with the Jeff Koons and the Jeff Koons moon phases, just utilizing his discerning eye and bringing that aesthetic to the moon to meet all our NASA safety requirements was really challenging with that aesthetic in mind. It's not a typical, so all of our typical vendors we go to produce things, that's not a requirement for them. So we are going to have to change the standards within the industry as we bring beauty and design in. And there's a couple of companies that are really focused on this now. So you'll see there's a company called Axiom Space that is just partnered with Prada, and they have a contract to do the Artemis spacesuits. And that's a wonderful example of how they're going to start bringing in design elements into astronaut design and bringing in individualism now, we hope. And so those are kind of some ideas and how we're really going to bring culture in much stronger with these different missions.
Is this really a new idea, or is this just an old idea that's been evolved over time? We look at Voyager 1 and 2 and having a record on there and putting out the different sounds and even images of what we look like, and that is art and that is culture. Is that an inspiration that came from this, or is this something that is just very different and very new that encompasses all different forms of culture and art?
That was a start, and I think it's sort of building off of these tiny increments. There was also art that was sent to the moon that's not verified, and so it was snuck onto the moon, a little tiny.
You have to explain that to me. I've never heard that before. How did that happen? Yeah.
So I forget who it was, but they had 6 different artists kind of just inscribe a little initial, and they snuck it on. So NASA can't verify, we can't validate that it's there, but we kind of know it's there. So yeah, we're building off of these missions, but at the same time, a lot of it doesn't exist. So Columbia was the very first company to put material on the moon and be able to brand it and market it as such. So yeah, there's a lot of firsts right now.
Are you noticing that people are more interested in space? I see this personally. I see this evolution, and this is why I love having this discussion, especially with women in space and in this area and field, because these intersections are growing so much. And I do feel that it is really the beginning of this, right? Of something that is going to grow, and space is going to, obviously, as we grow our technology, will be such an important cultural aspect to all different nations. So have you seen that there's been this resurgence of interest within space, technology, just STEM in general from people?
Oh yeah, it's hot right now. I think
Okay.
we're
On the average person, would you say, or just within
oh,
specifically in the industry? Okay.
everything from kids all the way through, I think, are really looking now at what is going on in the space industry. You see what Elon's doing with SpaceX. He's in the news all the time. And even with Tesla and things like that, and that's really helping. And then the accessibility that kids have to YouTube channels and a lot of the different things happening today. So we have more exposure to what is going on in the space industry too. It's always been quite exclusive in how you get in, and NASA and other entities like ESA and JAXA were kind of the only ones doing this before. But now that we have the private industry kind of leading the way with launch capabilities such as Jeff Bezos and Blue Origin, and they're sending William Shatner to space, and things like that. And so it's interesting because everybody's recognizing now that these are opportunities that we have, and bringing it into STEM programs. There's some really wonderful projects that schools are doing, and that's what we're excited about too, is really kind of reaching areas that have never had STEM programs before. We created a program with Procter and Gamble Well, we brought in 200 girls from underserved schools and we showed them how to build rockets, and we had a DJ there and gave them gift bags, and and we showed them virtual reality and different tools, and these kids really didn't have that experience before, and after the day it was just really incredible. They got to see their rockets fly, and so being able to do that, I think, really expands the kid's mind. And yeah, it's just, I think, accessibility. You've got launches every day. I know that our launch to the moon garnered like millions, billions of views around the world. Now it's a kind of a global achievement for us here on Earth. Yeah.
It's so interesting you say that because I do find that there is interest in the topic. News articles we see daily coming out, obviously from the debrief. I'm around it all the time. So, and I'm reading about it, and our writers are writing about it. But there's this other aspect of society that I find not so interested. And I think that's a mechanism of entertainment. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. Because, and when I say entertainment, I mean television and film. Film, I think, lends a little bit of a hand of doing a lot more science fact. And obviously, science fiction is huge, but science fact. And even in their science fiction, they have science fact as well. But the mechanism of television, I find that it is such a slow, it takes such a long time for it to progress and come to the point where it's actually covering a topic like space and what we're doing in real time. And instead, no hit to reality TV, but I find more people are invested in reality TV than they would be invested in potentially watching anything from Artemis launch or anything that's working, anything that's happening at SpaceX or NASA. So why do you think that television hasn't caught up and has changed its programming to reference what is the most amazing thing in technology in space exploration that's going on? It's more fantastical than almost science fiction at this point.
I think you're right. That's one of the reasons I'm based in Hollywood. We have the space industry here. We have Hollywood, and all of our writers and producers, directors, all the major motion picture companies are here. And one of the things years ago, I actually helped on a project called Pacific Rim. It was a movie that was about the future, and I developed the circuit suit. And I was working at Legacy Effects, and it was so amazing. That was my first real eye-opener to how fast technology in the film industry, they're building these suits. They have like 4 weeks to do it, and they have to pretty much function. They have to swim underwater, the actors and stuff. And so that was a real wonderful eye-opener to see. They have a lot of really wonderful technology in Hollywood too, with VR, AR, and even how fast they do their costume designs and things, and rapid 3D printing. But they don't have all the technology to different, light technology that they could be integrating into their costume work. So that was really neat. And then again, that was a real eye opener to me to see that Hollywood writers need to participate more in science meetings so that they can understand the really cool things that are happening in zero gravity and the moon, and then write that into their stories. So we are working with major motion picture and animation companies to try and get them to put their assets into the space industry, because it allows us to reach billions of users and billions of people around the world, like you said, in a different way, and get them interested in space. So a lot of the movies in space historically are, really scary, and space is a scary place, but how can we make it fun? How can we start bringing in more animation? How can we start kind of combining the two worlds together? And that is our focus, because we understand the public is very important in supporting space missions. And what are some of the habits that we use with space? So we're still, I asked my daughter, I said, what would you like to place on the moon? And what would your class like? And she said, nothing. And I said, nothing, and she was, in grade 3 or 4 at the time. And then I said, well, how about Minecraft or Roblox? And she said, oh yeah, now we're talking, so for them, for the next generation too, they're already living in these virtual worlds that they can explore pretty much anything. So we have to catch up to what they're doing, and that is our future. So yeah, that's the storytelling part of it. I think everybody in the space industry is starting to recognize how important this storytelling is. And we're working with teams over at JPL, the Jet Propulsion Lab, and their storytelling lab. They actually have a lab where they bring in producers and Hollywood writers to work with the engineers, so that the engineers can even tell their story of what they're doing and communicate in a different way. So it is a really important topic, and that is a really important kind of path to opening up everybody's mind. Like you mentioned, you've got this marketing side, and to be able to communicate and just spark more ideas. Yeah,
It's so exciting. And I've interviewed people that that influence film and television, and they'll talk about the real science behind Dune, for example. I've done interviews on that because I love them. I love, again, cross intersections between culture and science and technology and space. I just think it's so fun and so exciting. But you are right. The storytelling is so important. And I've worked myself with producers on film and television projects recently that I've noticed that they don't always have a grasp on the topic. And that's not their fault because they're, hired to be producers. And there isn't a lot of great producers that work in space and science. So Hollywood can't grab them. There are some, but there's not a lot. And so I
you're
think
right.
there's this sweet spot that could be developed within the entertainment, mechanism that offers an ability to have a really great background and understanding within STEM in general, and be able to then cultivate and produce pieces that are authentic and real and more accurate than what the average producer could do. Because it's not the average producer's fault if they're working on a subject. They're there to be hired for the mechanism to be a producer. And sometimes they are not the expert, and they're hiring experts to be those people on camera, but they don't know the story behind the scenes. And so I think that there is that sweet spot, and it's companies like yours that could come in and really help develop and foster new ideas and new people to contribute really meaningfully into Hollywood.
Yes, and I think you're right. And bringing companies such as Forespace in kind of at the beginning stages, because a lot of times they'll bring you in like at the marketing stage or after the budgets are kind of already set. So some of the times you bringing that in at the right time as well is really important. And you're right. It's still such a huge opportunity to explore, and a really important need. Yeah.
Yeah, and the best part about communicators and marketers, sometimes we get a bad rap. Right? We do, unfortunately. But the best part about being a communicator is that you communicate. And so, with really, really hard topics within STEM and with any type of sciences or exploration, you're able to really get to the nitty gritty and break it down into layman's terms for people. And this is where I find, again, that sweet spot where you come in and you're able to help people do that. You're able to break down really fundamentally hard concepts of space development, space exploration, and make it so that it's digestible for people so that they can go away and feel that they feel that they understand. They can go tell their friends, and they can get excited about it too, because it's something that they can process and capture themselves. And I think, again, we're in that sweet spot where this will start to happen more and more and more. This is why I do my podcast. I don't have degrees within that, but I find this topic so interesting as a marketer and as a journalist in this space. I find that this is where I can help to be able to connect people and make things approachable for them. And that's where you come in as well.
Yep, that's wonderful. And it is important to have an understanding, and not only of what are the capabilities, but also to know what time things are happening. With space missions, you kind of to pair things up with different movies, and then to hit the price point and to know, okay, maybe we want a celebrity or some astronaut to have a pizza on board the space station as part of a marketing effort for a movie. And, maybe that's cheaper to be done green screen, or maybe there are ways to work with NASA in order to send different products to the space station. So we really want to there is a sweet spot, and we do need to communicate about it more. So thank you for having me on the show, because the more I get to talk about it, the better other people can understand what we're doing. And I've been in stealth mode for so many years, because I work across the board between, Blue Origin, space station, all the way to the moon and stuff. So it's nice. Thank you so much for your understanding of the importance between the bridge of technology with entertainment and marketing.
For sure. Yeah, that's why I love doing the show. uh, I like to I wonder though, there must be challenges. And what challenges have you faced along the way since you started and where you are now?
Sure. A lot of the challenges in doing this are with companies and brands that take a long time to innovate. And so we have to find the people within the enterprise entities that are really there to push the company forward with innovation and bring together teams of people to understand. And it usually takes about 2 years for the massive corporations to be able to bring on the right partners, get all the CMOs, CEOs, everybody aligned. And then, because they're not used to what they can do. So you want to hit everything from their research and development departments all the way through to their marketing departments. And that's kind of been a really big challenge, because we can miss some of the deadlines that would partner with some of the projects with space. But it's now becoming more normal for people to, as you said, like everybody's sees all the launches that Elon is doing now, and they hear more about it. So it's getting easier. And also the fact that we have actually landed a private company on the moon. Now people believe we can do this. Before it was kind of like, oh, we haven't been to the moon in over 50 years, and a private company has never done this. So if you say, hey, we can do branding on the moon now, they didn't really know what that looked like. And now they're starting to see, okay, now we know what we can do.
And you've spoken a little bit about that previously. What does branding on the moon look like? Because I know that I can hear, but everybody's asking that question while watching this right now, wondering what that looks like. Like, what does branding on the moon look like? Now it could be the ISS, it could be missions going up, future missions going up, but it's not signs on the moon, I would say right now, until we're up there in a space tourism capacity. But what does it look like, and what will it look like in the future?
Sure. So in our mission, 8 to 12 months from now with intuitive machines, it can be signs. You can do signage and logos and stuff on the moon, but you want to pair it with an experiment. And then other ways, once we actually land on the moon, it's not coming back. So anything that we do, we have to make sure that the communications footage kind of ties together to that. And so we're still setting up communication networks on the moon. So to be able to do things like logos on the moon with like projection map, we rather than actually just putting a lane, some kind of a sign on the moon, we'll be able to do it in a way that is sustainable, where we're not harming the environment. We're actually doing this, like, we do have the capability to play a short film on the moon, or roll some logos and stuff through different technologies that we're developing for our future missions. And we see this as the next kind of Super Bowl advertisement. You've got the moon, which is global. It has eyeballs from around the world watching what we're doing, and we only have a few private companies that are heading to that location. And so it's a very rare opportunity right now. There's only a few missions for the next few years. And then Artemis is sending astronauts to the moon. So we're going to have the first woman to land on the moon in about 2027. And they'll be able to start doing a little bit more projects as we kind of integrate private industry traveling to the moon. And first it will start out with them, circling around the moon with Elon Musk's Starship. And then they'll start actually getting to land on the moon. And what are some of the things that people will want to bring with them as they're traveling there? We're going to start seeing brands that are going to start developing more than just the spacesuits, but also what will the luggage set look like when they're traveling there? What will the coffee, what will the beverages be when they're there? So branding is going to be in different scopes like that. It's going to be, what is the first kind of Starbucks that astronauts take with them to the moon, and things like that.
Again, as a marketer, I was like so exciting. But on the other side, on this human side of me, I'm like, do we want those things? Do we really? Isn't that a sacred space for us? Isn't that a space that should be protected? Do we really want to put projections on the moon? I could see that as we start doing tourism up in space, when we're doing space travel tourism, that would make sense, that there is that, connection point to one people, and consumers are going to want things, right? They're going to want coffee. You're right. They're going to want stuff like that. But when we look at the physical aspects of the moon and using that as a place to advertise, aren't we getting into like a really, really sticky area where we feel that why should we do that? We do this on Earth, and sometimes it doesn't work out to our benefit. And there's a lot of political issues, unfortunately, fueled around corporate brands as well. So, do we really want to do that in a space? Do we really want to do that in space, and specifically on the moon?
Mm-hmm. So that is a really good question, but I think the answer is yes. And the reason why it is really important to kind of start messaging and putting the marketing dollars behind brands in the space industry. And we really want to see participation between, let's say, a brand like Coca-Cola, but we don't want them to harm the moon either. So we're going to make sure that whatever they do, maybe Coca-Cola sponsors some type of a drill that will help with finding ice on the moon. And that will be the type of branding that they're going to do. So it's not necessarily projections. It's how can they get involved, and how can they put their marketing dollars towards campaigns that help us? We've got things like telescopes that we need to develop. So are there materials and metals that we can use to develop these telescopes that brands can put into their beverages here on Earth? And maybe it's a new alloy or something, and they can utilize that, and then kind of just this organic way of marketing. But it's also supporting the space industry, because if we leave it up to NASA and the government budgets only, we're going to be restricted on what we do. And we already know people are traveling to the moon anyway, so we want to try and make sure that it grows and is open to everybody. We want to make sure that the platform is, we're going. And so we need to make sure that we are kind of bringing as much human elements to the moon as well. The other thing to look at too is with places such as the moon and places as Mars. Mars is a planet, so there are a lot more protections around that than the moon, because do aliens, does life exist on Mars? And that's a whole nother topic, but that goes back to how we started, the ethics of traveling to space and stuff. So we're already doing it. So we may as well try and make sure that we grow technologies to help us here on Earth. And that's every project that For Space does. We're trying to look at how the technologies, how what we are doing can support us here on Earth. And with our Jeff Koons Moon Phases project, we are donating to Doctors Without Borders. We are donating to AMFAR AIDS research, and then also to education platforms too. So it's really, how can we kind of grow and build? And we can't be reliant upon NASA budgets anymore. Now it's time for the private industry, because we can act faster, we can innovate faster, and there's a lot of hope for new work. And that's kind of the underlying, is the future of what space offers us in jobs here on Earth. It's a huge industry that's opening up.
Oh, it is a massive industry that's opening up, and extremely progressive. My last question to you is, we look at political issues that are fired by corporate companies, fueled by corporate companies, I should say. What happens in the future when we have a company that is fueling a political agenda and supporting it, and we end up that it's in space as well? How do we balance out that? We have a really hard time balancing it here. How do we do that in space?
That is a very good question, and I think it needs that needs to be addressed kind of right now. One kind of example just with the amount of space debris that we have right now, and who is regulating that? How are these missions allowing all of this debris into our lower Earth orbit right now? It's really shocking when you see on the apps to see like just how much is out there. And so I think that we do have to come together collectively and really strengthen that position too, because right now there's a few people going to space, right, with their launch capabilities, and I don't know who is regulating that. It needs to be addressed. Yeah, there's a lot of gray areas right now that need a lot of work, because I think a lot of people don't realize that the accessibility is it's so much easier than it was before. You see SpaceX launching like 3 times a day now, and it used to be once every so many years, because it used to cost billions of dollars. So there's a lot to still look at, and all of the policy leaders as we move forward. I'm sure there's a lot of people having those discussions. My focus has not been that fully, and I'm more of I'll just be aware of what I can do, pulling in technologies to kind of bring it back to Earth. But yeah, we have a space conference coming up in Los Angeles called the International Space Development Conference. And there we have some wonderful leaders in space law that will have these discussions. So I invite you to join. I think you can join virtually, but you might get a better perspective of kind of what the discussions are as far as space law.
Yeah, I would love that. I will 100% watch that. And if I was in LA right now, I would be trying to attend if I could as a media member. But
Yeah.
thank you, Chantelle, so much for having this discussion with me. I think it's really important that we start talking about, brand guidelines, best practices when it comes to space tourism, space marketing. I can't believe I'm even saying that to some degree. Never thought as a kid that I would ever be talking about how public relations and marketing would be potentially projected on the moon. But this is where we are today. And so it's exciting. It's worrisome for sure in the future to see how humans and the rest of the world will handle this. But I do think that we are putting things in place like Space Force and other regulations to hopefully have a better understanding and a positive future with all of this. So thank you so much for being Rebelliously Curious with me today. And I look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thank you so much for having me.